Hello everybody, I'm Mike Fauché, and today I'd like to have a discussion on audio. All the different choices, some of the things to look for, and a lot of frustrations along the way. Hope you enjoy the video. Okay, today I want to talk about a lot of different products though, not just microphones. I want to talk about audio interfaces, I want to talk about USB versus XLR, and kind of share with you some of the frustrations that I've run into, because I've tried a lot of different audio interfaces and mixers, and they're just not all created equally, and they don't all give you the results you want. The other thing I want to talk about is kind of what you should be looking for. You're going to get a lot of information out there on YouTube, and a lot of it is extremely worthwhile. However, at the end of the day, what really matters is what works for you in your particular environment, with your particular equipment, and with your particular voice. So it's really there's a lot of variables in recording audio to make sure that you're happy with the results. It doesn't have to be professional grade, studio grade. It just has to sound good to you and to your listeners, the people that are going to listen to it. If it's recorded so low that you can't hear it, it's kind of annoying to listen to. Or if it has so much echo or background noise, it's difficult to listen to. And no matter what you do in terms of video quality and using high-end cameras and stuff, if your audio sounds terrible, it just downgrades the entire experience for your listeners. So again, I'm going to try to go over a lot of different equipment here so we can kind of try and cover all the different aspects and possibly what to look for and what not to do. Okay, before we get started on the actual hardware and some of the differences, one of the ways to validate any of this stuff is to actually use your audio software. You could be using Audacity or Audition, or anything else you're using is fine, but I wanted to give you an example of some of the differences and what to look for. Now, you'll get a lot of different information on YouTube about the levels and how you should be recording, and what levels you should be recording. The only thing that's common and consistent in that information is that you don't want to be clipping your audio. You need to keep it within a certain range. So what I wanted to show you here is I have an example here using Audition that I just recorded. It's a sample, and you can see based on the levels that I am roughly at a -9 dB average, probably a little less than that. And that's, in my opinion, kind of where you should be targeting, because as it gets lower than that, when you level off the sound or when you try to do any type of post-processing, you're also going to have to amplify some of the background noise. And to me, that sounds pretty bad. So, and let me give you a couple of examples. So if I look at some of these that I recorded recently I just recently did comparison of shotgun mics and boom mics, and basically covered probably 4 or 5 different types, from the Audio Technica to the Rhodes, a couple different models of the Rhodes, to the deities. And one of the things that stands out right away, using the same interface, the same connections, the same everything, is if you look at the levels of some of these, they're completely different. So if you look, for example, the first two are pretty close, but then this one here has got very little gain out of the output, which means this is going to require a little bit more sound processing. So to be recording this low is sort of hard to do. And these were all recorded on a Zoom recorder, so there's limits to how much gain you can get from one of those. So again, looking at this one, you see that it's a little bit different picture. It's a much more gain coming out of the microphone. So it doesn't matter at this point which one's which. What matters is that you understand that you need to test it. And if you're getting the results that are closer to something like this, I would really think carefully about the equipment you just selected and possibly try something else. Now, one of the things that comes up is some of the USB devices tend to record lower because you don't have as much control over the USB. The Blue Yeti, for example, is really good when it comes to gain. So you'll get a really good gain when it comes to your recording levels, so you can actually not have as much difficulty in post-processing. It doesn't sound like one of the higher end XLR mics, but it's a good microphone and it's got really good gain levels. If you take some of the other ones I've tried, they tend to be a little on the soft side. You'll get more, recording results like this. So one of the things I wanted to show you, and again, this depends on the software that you're using. But if you look at one of the things that you always want to do is to produce, is to level your loudness. You don't want to be doing any post-processing. You don't want to be doing noise reduction as much as you can. You don't want to be doing, EQs if you don't have to. It's all time, and it's all, you get a lot of variability in your sound quality. So one of the things I like to do is basically record and then just level it. And to level it is fairly simple. When I actually, drag this into the leveler, run it, and it's going to level it to the settings that I put down. And if you notice here, there's some settings here that are ULFS, and that's typically what I use. For podcasting and stuff, they like to keep it around 16. I use 12 for YouTube because YouTube will attenuate the sound to the levels they want to use. So I prefer to go in a little hotter. But I believe that this is the right level for me. It keeps me well within the clipping range. And, the sound quality it produces, you're hearing now, is pretty decent. So the one thing I wanted to point out in doing this is that when you have a very low level, you can see here from, some of the sections in the recording that it's also putting some gain into the background noise or the quiet zone. If I take another file that's recorded, for example, let me find one here. Let's take this one, for example. See, I already did that one. So let's take this one. So if I was to level this one and run it, again, because it came from such a low point, it's got a lot more gain to apply to it, so you can see a little bit more background noise. Is it going to be bad? No, it's not going to be bad. But the lower level that you start with, the more difficult it becomes to actually do post-processing. So if I go, for example, to the one that I just recorded from my PR using iCloud, or using the cloud, I should say, which is a hardware device we'll get into in a little bit, you can see that the gains on this are a little bit higher. So when I drag this down to actually normalize it, it's much lower. So you're seeing a lot less distortion being amplified, and you've got a much higher gain to work with. So this is going to sound a little bit less processed than if I started from something that records at -15 or -18, because below -18 it becomes almost difficult. But what you're hearing right now hasn't been post-processed. I don't do any kind of cleanup at all. I do is do the leveling, and that's it. So this is a great place to start. So any device or hardware that you pick that comes from, or that you're going to actually try to record video from, you want to make sure that it gives you a sufficient amount of gain. Now, whether it's mono or stereo is not important, because you can always do channel duplication, or you can always turn a mono into a stereo anytime you want. What's important is that you're getting the gain from a device, and that's what's truly important. So when you're making your selection, look carefully, or try carefully, make sure that you're happy with the sound unprocessed. Make sure you can hear it, that it's the ambience is quiet enough, things like that. And then go ahead and level it. Find whether you're using a free utility of some sort, or whether you're running Audacity or Audition. They all have the capabilities of leveling. So when you go ahead and level your sound to where you're getting the gain that you want, make sure it just doesn't sound really staticky or a lot of hissing in the background, because that just really detracts from the learning or listening experience, especially when somebody's playing it on a pair of headphones or an audio system and they've got it turned up. It's nothing worse than listening to a bunch of garbly in the background. So let's talk about the different devices now. Okay, let's get into the equipment a little bit. The first thing I want to point out is everything you've heard on this video prior to this point has been recorded on the Heil PR40. I'm now recording on the Deity S Mic 2, which is actually a condenser mic. It's a shotgun mic. So what you're probably going to hear is a little bit more background noise. It's probably going to pick up a little bit of movements. It's not going to be nearly as clean in terms of background ambience as you heard on the Heil PR40. So I just wanted to point that out. So first thing I'd like to get into is just kind of cover some of the equipment I have here, and this isn't everything, but it's some of the things that we talked about. And then I'm going to make a few suggestions on how to get the most out of your audio. I just kind of wanted to go over some of the equipment I use. So this is actually the Heil PR40. It's, in my opinion, one of the better mics out there. It is an XLR mic. Like many of the dynamic mics, especially the better sounding ones, they tend to produce pretty low gains. So in order to really make them sound better, you usually have to have either a good mixer or audio interface that actually has a lot of gain, which is not that many out there. Or alternatively, you can use something like the Cloud CL1. And the Cloud CL1 is really a simple device. Basically, it allows you to put in a signal from the microphone, and using the 48 volt phantom power from your mixer or your other device, it actually puts about 25 dB of gain into your microphone. So it's very clean, so it doesn't add lots of distortion. So this teamed up with this gives you some tremendous sound, and that's what you heard on the first part of this video, was actually this combination. This isn't the cheapest combination in the world. You have to be prepared to spend a little bit of money. These run about $360, and the CL1 will run you about $150. There's a couple of competitor products to the CL1. One is the Fethead. That actually has lower gain, and I found that to be not quite as good as the Cloud. So I actually have both, and I'm actually running the Fethead on the microphone that you're hearing right now, which is the Deity S Mic 2, because it also, although it's more efficient than most that I've heard, it helps to have that extra little bit of gain going into my mixer. So that's just to cover a couple of them. There's a variety of audio interfaces and mixers you can get. This is an example of a Onyx Blackmagic. It's a really simple USB interface. Not much to it. 2 XLR inputs. USB to your computer, and if you want to go out to the monitor speakers or something like that, you can. The problem I have with this is that this is really, really clean, but the output of the preamps is pretty low, so you've got to have a pretty efficient microphone in order to make this work the way you want, or you have to be prepared to use it in conjunction with something like the CL1. So you're going to need some boost from this guy in order to get what you want. So, and probably one of the more versatile tools in for recording your audio, in my opinion, is to get something like the Zune, either the HN4 Pro or the H6. There's a bunch of different models. Tascam also makes some really good ones. But these are versatile for a couple of reasons. Number one, they have two XLR mics built in. They can produce the 48 volt phantom power needed for condenser mics. So obviously you can power those fairly easily. Has a built-in capsule mic, so you can actually record directly off of this. Although it doesn't sound very good, you can do it in a pinch. And then you also have a third input back here, which is 3.5 millimeter, where you can put like a lavalier mic or some other type of microphone. So you can actually record multiple channels. You can actually record all of these at the same time. So you can enable this function and this capsule mic and the two XLRs all at the same time and record a multi-channel connection. So it's a really versatile product. The other thing is you actually can enable this as a audio interface. So if you notice here, there's a USB connection on the side. So if you plug this into a computer, it'll give you the option of using it as, you'll be able to read it as storage, or you'll be able to read it as an audio interface. And so if you select audio interface, it'll actually take the mic inputs and go directly into your computer, so that just like a mixer or an audio interface would. So if you're on a budget or if you're just getting started, in my opinion, this is a great place to start. The gains, the preamps on the H4 and Pro are actually pretty good. The non-Pro had pretty weak preamps, so you probably don't want to get that. This actually is enough to drive almost every microphone. I've even driven the Heil with it, though it's extremely low inputs coming into the recording. The Heil and CL1 and this Zune combo actually works pretty decently. So there's a way that you can mix. So if you start out, you can start out with something like the Zune and add some type of decent microphone of your choice. Preferably, if you're going to be in a studio environment, you probably want to pick a dynamic mic of some sort. And again, test them out, make sure your gain levels are acceptable, and you're good to go. There are different types of microphones out there. There's the XLR is a dynamic mic. It's made for in studio work. You have something like this Audio-Technica shotgun mic, which is actually an AT875R. It's a pretty decent microphone, very lightweight, very portable. Works really well with something that does, like the Zune, something that doesn't need, this actually puts out, it's pretty efficient microphone and actually puts out pretty decent signal. So it's fairly comfortable to drive off the Zune or an interface like the Onyx. So those are some choices. The other option is you have something like the Blue Yeti. So the Blue Yeti is kind of a unique microphone. It's really big and kind of heavy, and it doesn't sound all that good, but it does work pretty well in terms of gain. You have some options in the back where you can actually set the pickup pattern and the gain, which is a kind of a unique thing because you don't always get a gain input on USB devices. Typically XLR is a much better way to go than USB, but this does provide you with a really pretty decent gain, and it will do a pretty decent job if you have a very quiet room. So it is a condenser mic, so it will pick up a lot of ambient sounds, so you got to be careful, or be aware of that, I should say. So make sure your room is somewhat quiet and you're kind of good to go there. It's something that it's a decent microphone in which to start with. I probably would, consider upgrading at some point to something a little bit more smoother and probably less prone to pick up dynamic or background noise. Let's talk briefly about the difference between USB and XLR. Obviously, besides the fact that XLR, you need some type of interface. So you'll need either an straight audio interface that attaches, converts to USB and attaches to your computer, or you'll need to record to something like Zune. XLR, you cannot typically go directly into your computer natively. There are some adapters you can use and stuff like that, like from Blue Ice. You can use an adapter that converts XLR to directly to USB, on a single connection basis. But typically, if you're going to use XLR, you probably want to go into like a Zune recorder, or into a mixer board like the Behringers. I can show you a couple different Behringers. Okay, so here's an example of, I won't call it a typical mixer, but of an example of a mixer. This happens to be a Behringer. Now this one, these come in different types and shapes and flavors. The main thing that sets them apart is two things. One is the number of XLR inputs and the number of channels that the device has. The other is the output levels, or the output type, I should say. This particular one does not have any USB whatsoever, so you have basically only a power input. It actually outputs only through these output terminals on the top. So you have a main out that it actually outputs to. So your signal is really an analog signal that's going to go into either your computer directly, or into another device if you're using something else. Some of the other mixers, like the larger or the big brother to this, like the one I'm using right now that you're listening on, a 1204 USB mixer, has more channels. It also has USB, so I don't need an analog output to go to a computer. I can actually just plug it into the computer and read the sound directly in. So it's a little bit cleaner, easier, and I don't have to mess around with. So for the most part, going it with a USB mixer does provide some advantages in terms of cleanliness and flexibility. It's easier to move from computer to computer. You're not relying on the probably lower quality soundboard that's in your computer, or at least in many computers. So going with a USB mixer does make perfect sense. Be aware that they are typically slightly lower output than an analog, because you can actually adjust the gain on a little bit differently on an analog mixer. But if you get a decent one like a Yamaha, or some of the new Behringers, which have better preamps, you should be fine. And again, if you have a problem, you can always add something like the CL1. But they offer a really nice clean output. The 1204 that I'm using right now, which I'll post pictures of. Can't bring it on the table since we're actually recording with it, but actually has 4 mic inputs, which I typically have 2 to 3 running at any given time, because you can actually switch in the different microphones. So depending on what I'm doing, whether I'm sitting at my desk or doing what I'm doing right now, I'm going to switch to a different type of microphone. So I have everything hooked up, and it's a little easier to manage. The other is that I can do like a mix minus and bring in like a Skype signal or something like that. So it offers me a lot of flexibility. Do I need that, or do you need to have that when you're starting? Absolutely not. Like I said, you can do almost everything you need with just a Zune H4n Pro, and at a much lower cost. So those are some options. I did want to point out that if you are looking at mixers, as I mentioned, the Yamaha, the Behringers are pretty good to look at. I had the recent pleasure of trying the PreSonus audio box, which the hardware was pretty decent, but the gain was just so terrible that it made it virtually unusable. The reason I tried it, and the one advantage that it had, was the fact that it had basically you could output to the iPad directly, which was kind of unique if you're trying to do a portable type recording. The other is tried the Tascam IXR. Again, not real great in terms of output. Same thing, it did have a dedicated iPad output, but it just didn't work very well. And I've used in the past a couple of different behringers. I've also used the Focusrite Scarlett 2i2, which is a nice device. The gain, in my opinion, is not as good as the Behringer 1204 USB mixer. The one advantage I found with the USB that I have, the Behringer 1204, is that it's huge. It's just physically big. It's roughly 2.5 times the size of the Scarlett 2i2. So, yeah, it sounds better. You got more inputs, you got more features, but it's just huge. So, depending on your desk configuration, it may not work out for you. But there's the audio interfaces and mixers. There's a lot to choose from, and you can get a smaller Behringer and probably get just as good a signal. The real catch is to get that combination of mixer and microphone that gives you the gain that you're looking for, the clarity that you're looking for, and that you like the sound. And that takes a little bit of experimenting, so you're may have to go through a few variations, but don't settle for it if you don't like it. A couple other things to consider, when you're making your choice is think about what environment you're recording in. If you're in a room that's got some kind of treatment, or at least has rugs and things on the walls and things like that, you can probably select have a larger selection of microphones. However, if you're using, if your room is kind of quiet, or if there's a lot of background noise, I should say, and you want to really get the maximum performance, consider getting something like a dynamic mic. That becomes a lot less sensitive to background noise, keyboard noise. It's not quite it doesn't sound as bad in an echoey room as, say, a condenser mic would. So you got to kind of look at what your environment is. I will also post a link to some acoustic panels that I made, because I did treat my office, and it makes a world of difference, because in my office is laminate floors and basically walls, and the sound characteristics for both playback and recording were terrible. But with some simple acoustic treatments, it was night and day. So I certainly recommend those. Again, it depends on your room and your configuration and everything else. I can't tell you that you're going to get the same results that I did. I can only tell you that I did. But I'll post some links to my build article on my blog, and I'll also post links to the virtually identical configuration that you can buy pre-made from ATS Acoustics. And they're pretty nice, and you can just pick them up and put them on the wall. If you like to build things, then you can refer to my article and kind of get an idea of what I built. I think they turned out real nice, and they certainly work well. So in closing, there's no magical bullet. They're in terms of equipment. You really have to find something that really works for you. My general recommendations is to start with a good recorder, digital recorder, or a good mixer, and then try some different microphones. And if you're doing a bench or desktop recording, try and start with a dynamic microphone and find something that works well. And start low. There's a lot of good mics like the AT2100 from Audio-Technica. That actually is a pretty decent sounding mic. It doesn't have the range of the Heil PR40 in terms of just the broad tone qualities of the microphone, but it's like $50 or $60 or something like that. And I have one of those as well, and I used it many times on a mobile recording setup that I used to carry around with me, and it works well. It works really well. And that time teamed up with either the Zune recorder or a small portable mixer, is a really good combination. In a pinch, it actually also has a USB interface, so it's a dual interface connection. It's XLR and USB, and you can plug that into directly in a computer and really have an inexpensive mobile station. Again, it's got, there are limitations because of the gain of USB and the microphone is on the lower end, but it works. I mean, it does a pretty good job. A lot of people are still using them when they're podcasting today. If you need something like a shotgun mic or something like that, consider the Deity line. I think they sound better than the Rhodes. And the Sennheiser, I've tested them all, and I found this one to be actually one of the better ones. So, but again, that varies from, depending on the voice and, your other equipment that's involved. So you might, but also the pricing was actually pretty decent. And then lastly, if you're looking for like a portable setup, you can get something like, I picked up a camera adapter for my iPad, and this basically allows me to plug in either a USB mic, or a USB interface, and actually record directly to GarageBand. So, if you need a mobile setup or you don't want to spend a lot on different things, you can also go real simple with a USB microphone into this directly into your iPad through GarageBand or your iPhone, and just record directly into GarageBand. It works pretty well. So I hope that helps you be a little less confused, or at least points you in the right direction at looking at some of the equipment and, kind of getting you started. I think if you start with a good audio interface, a good mixer, and then add, a microphone, and then kind of go on from there, ultimately you'll be pretty happy with your setup. It's probably easier to if you had a good interface to, change out and upgrade your microphones over the years or as your needs change. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this. Don't forget to subscribe. I'll post links to all of this equipment in case you're interested in taking a look at it. Don't forget to subscribe and, click that little bell so you get the notifications when I do post a new video. I try and post semi-regularly, every 2 or 3 weeks, depending on time. Anyway, have a wonderful day, and thanks for listening.